My sister got married in secret. When I asked why, she confessed she wasn't allowed to marry anyone in our country, because we were legally siblings. Story 1. My sister, Sybil, just got married in secret. No announcement, no invite, not even a heads up. She just dropped the news over coffee like it was nothing. I didn't even get to give her away or say congratulations properly. It wasn't until I pushed her for answers that she hit me with a confession so insane, I still don't know how to process it. She said she couldn't get married in our country because, get this, we're legally siblings. Yeah, I'll get to that. But first, let me tell you how it all went down. I always thought Sybil and I were normal siblings. We grew up in a little coastal town in Maine called Eastport. It's small enough that everyone knows your business, or so I thought. I'm the older sibling by 3 years. Sybil was the creative one, always drawing or painting something. I was more practical, building stuff in the shed with Dad. We weren't super close growing up, but we got along better as adults. Our parents, Dahlia and Reginald, were strict but reliable. They weren't touchy-feely, but they were always there when we needed them. They kept a tidy house, paid bills on time, and handled things with precision. Maybe too much precision, as I've come to realize. About 6 months ago, Sybil texted me out of the blue to meet her at this diner we both liked. I didn't think much of it. She looked nervous when I got there, but I chalked it up to her usual artsy dramatics. She always had a flair for the dramatic, but this was different. I got married, she said. I actually laughed because it sounded so ridiculous. Sure, and I'm the president, I joked. I'm serious, she shot back, her voice steady but her hands shaking as she gripped her coffee mug. That wiped the grin off my face. Wait, what? To who? When? Why didn't you tell me? She looked away, clearly uncomfortable. His name is Roderick. We got married last week in Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia? Why the hell would you go to Canada to get married? Her hands started trembling worse, and her voice dropped. Because we couldn't do it here. Now I was confused and pissed. Why not? Is he already married or something? Is this some kind of visa thing? She looked at me, and her eyes were already welling up with tears. No. It's because we're legally siblings. I thought she was joking. I even laughed again, but she wasn't smiling. What the hell are you talking about? You're my only sibling. She nodded. I thought so too. But it turns out I'm adopted. My brain short-circuited. Adopted? She started crying softly, and I could barely hear her over the sound of my own confusion. I found out a few years ago, but I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to think I wasn't your sister anymore. Wait. Back up, I said, my voice louder than I intended. What does this have to do with you being legally siblings with this guy? Start from the beginning. That's when she spilled everything. She met Roderick 2 years ago through a mutual friend. They hit it off instantly, like one of those cheesy love at first sight stories. They started dating, and everything seemed perfect. She said he was kind, smart, and genuinely cared about her. But when they started talking about marriage, Roderick suggested they both look into their family histories. He was a genealogy nerd and thought it would be a fun bonding activity. That's when things went south. Roderick's family history showed that his parents had given up a baby girl for adoption years before he was born. A few more dots connected, and they realized Sybil was that baby. So you're biologically siblings? I asked, horrified. No, she said, almost shouting. Biologically, we're not related at all. My biological parents aren't the same as his, but because my adoption wasn't fully closed, the paperwork still connects me to his family. On paper, we're siblings. I just sat there, staring at her. It felt like my entire understanding of our family had just been ripped apart. Wait. When did you find out you were adopted? About 3 years ago, she said, sniffling. And you didn't think to tell me? I didn't know how. I didn't want to ruin things. I didn't think it mattered until I met Roderick. I had a million questions, but the biggest one was about our parents. Do Mom and Dad know? Sybil nodded. I confronted them when I found out. They admitted it but begged me not to dig deeper. They said they didn't know much about my biological family and didn't think it mattered. But they lied. Lied about what? They knew, she said, her voice trembling with anger. They knew my biological parents had more kids after me. They just didn't think it would ever come up. At that point, I was shaking with rage. Our parents had lied to both of us for years. They didn't just hide Sybil's adoption, they buried it under layers of secrecy, knowing full well it could blow up one day. I confronted them the same night. I drove to their house, walked right in, and demanded answers. At first, they tried to play dumb, but when I told them Sybil had already spilled the truth, they gave up the act. Yes, we knew, my mom said, looking more fragile than I'd ever seen her. But we didn't think it would matter. Didn't think it would matter? I snapped. You lied to us our entire lives. You let Sybil grow up without knowing who she really was. And now this? Do you even care about the damage you've done? My dad stayed quiet, which pissed me off even more. My mom started crying, but I didn't care. I told them exactly what I thought of them before storming out. Since then, I've barely spoken to them. Sybil and Roderick have decided to stay in Nova Scotia. They're trying to build a life together away from the judgment and legal issues they'd face here. I've visited them once, and honestly, it's still weird. I love Sybil, and I want her to be happy, but this whole situation feels like something out of a bad soap opera. As for me, I don't know where to go from here. Everything I thought I knew about my family has been turned upside down. My parents betrayed my trust. My sister's entire identity was stolen from her. And now, every time I think about what could have been avoided if they'd just been honest, I get angrier. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm pretty sure things will never go back to normal. After weeks of sitting with all this chaos, I realized I couldn't let things stand. I was furious with my parents for lying to us, for burying this secret like it would never come to light, and for causing this mess for Sybil and Roderick. It wasn't just about me feeling betrayed anymore, it was about the years of control, manipulation, and silence they'd forced on all of us. They'd made a choice to protect themselves at the expense of everyone else, and I wasn't going to let them walk away without consequences. I decided to do what my parents hated most. I dug into the truth. Sybil and I teamed up. If we were going to confront them again, we needed everything. We reached out to the adoption agency, tracked down old records, and even contacted Roderick's family. It wasn't easy, most people don't want to talk about messy family history. But eventually, we pieced it all together. Turns out, my parents had known a lot more than they let on. They'd chosen Sybil specifically because they thought it would make them look good. Her biological parents had been young and struggling, and the adoption agency had been eager to place her with a stable, well-off family. But instead of being upfront about everything, my parents worked to keep her adoption as hidden as possible. They didn't want to deal with the stigma of raising someone else's kid, so they lied, to her, to me, to everyone. The real kicker? My mom had kept in touch with Sybil's biological parents for the first couple of years after the adoption. She knew they'd had more children, including Roderick. She just assumed it would never matter. Armed with all this information, I called a family meeting. Sybil flew in from Nova Scotia to join me. My parents thought it was just going to be a friendly visit, but we had other plans. We sat them down at the dining room table, the same table where we'd eaten countless dinners as a happy family, and laid everything out, every lie, every secret, every choice they'd made to protect themselves at the cost of our lives. At first, they denied everything, just like before. But when we started pulling out the paperwork, the adoption records, the letters from the agency, even some old emails my mom had sent to Sybil's biological mother, they went pale. My dad tried to spin it, saying they did what they thought was best, but it was clear they'd never thought about anyone but themselves. "You didn't do what was best for us," Sybil said, her voice trembling but firm. "You did what was best for you. And now, because of your lies, I had to leave the country just to marry the person I love. Do you even understand what that's like?" They had no answer. For the first time, they looked small. Powerless. That's when I went for the final blow. Sybil and I had already decided we weren't going to keep their secrets for them anymore. If they wanted to live a lie, that was on them, but we weren't going to be part of it. We told them, right then and there, that we were going to share the truth with everyone, the extended family, their friends, everyone in town. At first, they laughed, like they thought we were bluffing. But when we started texting and calling people right in front of them, their faces fell. I called our Aunt Ruth, who'd always been the family gossip, and told her everything. Sybil sent messages to our cousins, explaining the whole situation. We even posted about it on Facebook, something we knew would spread like wildfire in a town as small as Eastport. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. The phone calls began pouring in, relatives demanding explanations, neighbors asking if it was true. My parents tried to do damage control, but there was no way to put this genie back in the bottle. Everyone knew now. Their perfect, controlled image was shattered. But we didn't stop there. Sybil and I filed formal complaints with the adoption agency, highlighting the ethical breaches my parents had committed by hiding her background and keeping in touch with her biological parents without proper documentation. We didn't think much would come of it, but it turns out adoption agencies take this kind of thing seriously. They launched an investigation, and while I don't know the full outcome, I do know it caused my parents a lot of stress. And just to twist the knife a little further, Sybil and I worked with Roderick's family to organize a proper wedding celebration in Eastport, right in our parents' backyard. We rented out the town's community center, invited everyone from both families, and made it a huge, public event. It was a way to reclaim Sybil's story and make sure everyone knew that, despite the chaos, she wasn't ashamed of her choices. My parents? They weren't invited. And from what I heard, they spent the whole weekend hiding in their house, trying to avoid the inevitable questions from neighbors. After the wedding, Sybil and Roderick moved back to Nova Scotia to continue their lives together. They're happy now, and that's all that matters to me. As for me, I've cut ties with my parents completely. They've tried reaching out a few times, but I haven't responded. They made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences. The truth has a way of catching up with people, no matter how much they try to bury it. My parents built their lives on lies, and now they're left with nothing but the rubble. And honestly, I don't feel bad for them. Sometimes, revenge isn't about getting even. It's about taking back control, about making sure the people who wronged you can't hurt you, or anyone else, ever again. And for the first time in my life, I feel free. Story 2. My name is Eustace, and I thought I had a decent life. I live in Dayton, Ohio, which isn't the most exciting place, but it's home. I worked a steady job, had a small circle of good friends, and most importantly, I had Morgana, my girlfriend of 5 years. She wasn't just my partner, she was the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Then there was Lester, my best friend since high school. We'd been through everything together: stupid teenage mistakes, college nights that got out of hand, breakups, layoffs, you name it. He was the guy I could call at 3 a.m. if I needed help, and he'd show up without asking questions. I trusted Lester like a brother. But as it turns out, the people closest to you can hurt you in ways you'd never expect. It all started to unravel one regular Thursday night. Morgana came home late. She didn't text much during the day, but I figured she was busy at work. She managed a small boutique downtown, and with the holiday season creeping up, things were hectic for her. When she finally walked in, she looked off. Not just tired. Distant. Cold, almost. I asked her if everything was okay, and she shrugged it off with some vague excuse about being tired. Then, out of nowhere, she dropped the bomb: "Eustace, I think we need to break up." I couldn't process it at first. We weren't fighting. There wasn't any big argument. I thought we were fine. Sure, we had little disagreements here and there, but nothing major. I sat there like an idiot, trying to make sense of it. I asked her why. She just said, "I need to figure some things out." The classic line. But when I pressed her, asked her if there was someone else, she swore up and down that there wasn't. I didn't believe her, but I didn't have proof. She packed a bag and left that night, saying she'd crash at a friend's place. And just like that, 5 years were gone. I barely slept. I spent the whole night pacing around the apartment, replaying our last few months together in my head, trying to figure out what I'd missed. The next morning, Lester texted me, "Hey man, can we talk? It's important." I thought maybe he'd heard about the breakup and wanted to check on me. Lester had always been the guy who had my back, so I agreed to meet him at our usual spot, Donnie's Diner. He showed up looking like he hadn't slept either, which was weird because Lester was usually the calm, laid-back one. He sat down across from me, ordered coffee, and then just stared at it for what felt like forever. Finally, he blurted it out, "I've been seeing Morgana." I thought he was joking. He had to be. I even laughed, because what else do you do when someone says something so absurd? But he didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. That's when it hit me, he was serious. I asked him how long it had been going on. He mumbled something about a couple of months. Months. So while Morgana and I were still together, they were sneaking around behind my back. I asked him how the hell he could do this to me. His answer? "It just happened. We didn't plan it. And you two were never that close anyway." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not that close? I'd been with Morgana for 5 years. I thought Lester and I were practically family. And now they were telling me that none of it mattered? I got up and walked out. I didn't even finish my coffee. I drove home in a daze, replaying the conversation over and over. The betrayal wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. How long had they been laughing behind my back? How many times had Lester come over to hang out while secretly hooking up with Morgana? The thought made me sick. I wanted to confront Morgana, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. She'd already made her choice. Instead, I threw myself into figuring out how it all went so wrong. I scrolled through old photos, texts, anything that might give me a clue, and then I remembered something. Morgana had this habit of saving screenshots of her conversations. She'd always said it was for just in case, but I never thought much of it. Her old phone was still in the junk drawer in the kitchen. It was an older model she'd replaced a year ago, but she never bothered to wipe it clean. I powered it on, half expecting to find nothing. But what I found made my stomach turn. There were screenshots of her flirting with other guys. Dozens of them. Some dated back 2 years, long before we broke up. And they weren't innocent chats, either. They were explicit. "You're so much more fun than Eustace and I'm bored, wanna come over?" Stuff like that. There was even one where she joked about how clueless I was. But the kicker? There were messages from her to Lester. Messages that made it clear their little relationship had started long before she ended things with me. She'd been playing both of us. Or rather, she'd been playing him while stringing me along. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to just delete it all and try to move on. But another part of me, the part that felt betrayed, humiliated, and downright furious, knew I couldn't let this slide. Lester had betrayed me just as much as she had, if not more. He'd been my best friend for years, and he threw it all away for what? Morgana? Someone who clearly couldn't stay loyal to anyone? So I made a decision. I gathered every screenshot that showed Morgana flirting with other guys and sent them to Lester. I didn't sugarcoat it. I just attached the images and wrote, "You should know what she's been up to. Good luck with that." The fallout was immediate. Lester tried calling me, but I didn't answer. Then he texted, asking if we could meet up and talk. I ignored him. I didn't owe him anything anymore. The next day, their relationship status disappeared from Facebook. By the end of the week, they weren't even friends on social media. I guess Lester finally realized what everyone else could see: Morgana wasn't worth losing your best friend over. As for Morgana, she moved out of the apartment completely and stopped reaching out. Last I heard, she was living in Columbus, working at some high-end boutique. I don't know what she's doing now, and honestly, I don't care. Lester tried a few more times to reconnect, but I shut him down every time. He made his choice, and now he has to live with it. After Lester and Morgana vanished from my life, I thought the storm was over. But the more I sat with it, the angrier I got. Not just at them, but at myself for being so blind. I wasn't content with just cutting them off. No, I wanted them to feel what I felt. To know the full weight of their betrayal. They'd wrecked my trust, my peace, and 5 years of my life. I wanted them to know exactly how that felt. Revenge wasn't something I thought I'd ever stoop to, but when people treat you like a doormat, sometimes you have to show them you're not one. I started small. Morgana left behind a few things when she moved out, some expensive jewelry, a few dresses, and a designer purse she used to obsess over. Stuff I'd bought her over the years as gifts. I took it all to a pawn shop and sold it. The money wasn't much, but it felt like the first small victory. If she wanted to start fresh, she could do it without the things I worked hard to give her. Then I thought about Lester. He'd always been protective of his image, especially on social media. He liked to act like the perfect guy, kind, reliable, and loyal. But I knew better now. I had a goldmine of evidence from Morgana's old phone. Not just of her flirting with other guys, but also of the conversations they'd had about me. "He's so boring," one of her texts to Lester read. "You're way more fun to be around." And Lester replied, "Yeah, I don't even know why he's still with you. He's so clueless." So, I took my time crafting the perfect plan. I didn't want anything over the top or illegal. I just wanted to expose them for what they really were: liars and backstabbers. I made an anonymous account on a few social media platforms, using a fake name and a random stock photo as my profile picture. Then I uploaded all the screenshots, every single one. I didn't include my name or any identifying details about myself, but I made sure everyone could tell who the messages were about. The captions were simple but damning. Ever wonder what happens when your girlfriend and your best friend betray you? Here's a look behind the scenes. I posted it in a few local groups and tagged people I knew would spread it around. It didn't take long before the posts blew up. People in Dayton love drama, and this was the juiciest kind. My phone started blowing up with messages from mutual friends asking if I'd seen it. I played dumb, saying, "Wow, that's crazy. Can't believe someone would expose them like that." Of course, I didn't admit it was me. Morgana and Lester's reputations tanked almost overnight. People who used to idolize them started distancing themselves. Morgana's boutique job wasn't immune to the fallout, either. One of the regular customers recognized her from the posts and made a scene in the store, loudly calling her a homewrecker in front of other shoppers. Not long after, I heard she quit her job and left the city altogether. I didn't know where she went, and frankly, I didn't care. As for Lester, he wasn't spared, either. His workplace wasn't huge, and word got around fast. Someone shared the posts with his coworkers, and soon enough, he was the talk of the office. Apparently, one of the higher-ups had been cheated on in a similar way, so they didn't take kindly to what they saw. Lester didn't lose his job, but he might as well have. The tension at work got so bad that he ended up transferring to a different branch in a smaller town. Last I heard, he's living in Springfield, Ohio, working a much less prestigious role. Karma, I guess. The best part? Neither of them ever figured out I was behind it. They probably assumed it was some random person who stumbled across the screenshots. And that was fine by me. I didn't need credit. I didn't need recognition. All I wanted was to see them face the consequences of their actions, and they did. Now, a year later, my life is calmer. I'm not bitter anymore, just wiser. I've started dating again, nothing serious, but I've met some great people who remind me that not everyone is like Morgana or Lester. I've also reconnected with friends who stuck by me during the chaos. They told me they'd always had my back, and for that, I'm grateful. The way I see it, people like Morgana and Lester dig their own graves. I just handed them the shovel. And honestly, I'm good with that.